Hello, I'm Ryan O'Connell, a certified financial risk manager, and in this video, I'll take you through everything you need to know about the FRM designation in a clear and structured way. So, the FRM designation is a series that's focused on financial risk management, offering a deep dive into the principles and practices of managing risk in the financial world. The curriculum is really well done, but it's very math heavy and quantitative heavy. So, you'll walk away from it knowing a lot of finance math for sure. And the other important thing is that there's two parts to this test. So the first part focuses on building a solid foundation of core risk concepts. There's four primary subjects in the part one exam. The first one is foundations of risk management. The second is quantitative analysis, then financial markets and products, and finally valuation and risk models. I would say part one is a little bit easier than part two. It's not nearly as deep. But part two really takes it a step further by diving into the application of these concepts in real world scenarios. There's six primary topics that you'll have to learn in part two. We have market risk measurement and management, credit risk measurement and management, operational risk and resilience, liquidity and treasury risk measurement and management, risk management and investment management, and then finally, current issues in financial markets. Let's talk a little bit about the approximate amount of time it takes to study for this exam. So, according to the GARP website, preparation time can vary based on your experience and your background, what's your education level, etc. So, candidates typically spend about 240 hours per part. Some will report as little as 100 hours of study time, while some might need over 400 hours if they come from a different background. So from my personal experience, I would say I was closer to that 240 hour mark, or maybe even a little bit below it, mainly because I tackled the FRM exams right after I was completing the CFA program. And since there's significant overlap in the material, I didn't really need to start from scratch on a lot of the topics in the test. So if you're in a similar position, you might also find that you don't need as much study time. Let's talk a little bit about how much the test costs. So for each part of the exam, the registration fees range from $600 for early registration up to about $800 for the standard registration. So in total, you'd be looking at about 1,200 to 1,600 USD for both parts if you register on time. Additionally, you may want to budget for around $500 per test for these third-party test prep materials, as the source books, in my opinion, are really dense, and many candidates are likely going to find better value in third-party prep providers. So while that might feel like it's a significant upfront cost, I think you need to keep it in perspective because compare it to a university degree, it's really just a fraction of the cost of that. Plus, you don't really need to worry about the ongoing membership fees once you've earned the designation because it's not required like the CFA Institute requires you to pay annually. You don't have to pay annually with FRM, which is really nice. So yeah, it's a big spend for a test, but I would say that it's a lot cheaper than a lot of other educational paths in finance, such as typical, let's say, master's degree. So how about a topic a lot of people are probably going to care about, the FRM's prestige and recognition. I think the prestige of the FRM designation is solid, particularly in the world of banking, where it's pretty well known. However, it's certainly not as well known as the CFA from my experience talking to people, at least not where I live in the US. I don't think it carries the same weight as the CFA designation to most people in the field. In fact, I've had experiences where even people working in financial risk management haven't heard of what the FRM is, and I've had to explain what it is to them. So it's one of those certificates where it's like if you know, you know. Like if you went through it, you know how difficult it is, you respect that other people went through it, but most people aren't going to know what it is, and they're going to have no clue that you probably do actually have a lot of knowledge if you went through this program. So I would say it's a respected designation amongst its own community, but not well known outside of that community. So what types of jobs can the FRM help you get? So the FRM designation opens up doors to a variety of roles in financial services industry. I would say it's particularly valued at major financial institutions like banks, but it could also be valuable at asset management firms or hedge funds, consulting firms, and in particular, actually regulatory bodies would find it pretty valuable too. So let's break down some of the key roles you might find yourself in, and I'll just briefly describe, like at a simple definition level, what you might do in these roles. So One role would be a risk analyst, where you use analytical skills to evaluate investment portfolios, project potential losses, and recommend strategies to limit risk. These roles are pretty common in banks, insurance companies, and consulting firms. Another role that you could achieve that would be a little bit higher up, like as a people manager, would be a risk manager, where you could identify and assess potential risks that could impact a business, forecast trends, and recommend investment strategies. So these professionals could work in all sorts of institutions, like in the trading space, private banking, public banking, retail banking, etc. The next job that we could look at is a credit risk analyst. There's a lot of credit risk analysts with the FRM designation. In this type of role, you would assess the creditworthiness of individuals or companies by reviewing financial data and calculating default risk. This could often be found in institutions that do lending, asset management companies, or rating agencies. Another role that you could land, and this is one that I used to have, is as a market risk analyst. In this role, you might research market trends and provide assessments to inform investment decisions. These roles could be common in banks, which is where I did the role, or in energy companies and other investment-focused industries. Another analyst role you could get would be in the regulatory space as a regulatory risk analyst. So this is where you would actually work for the entities that govern the private companies. So in this role, you might study legislation and recommend compliance strategies for firms, often in the financial industry, but also in healthcare, utilities, and even potentially engineering. Another popular role would be as an operational risk manager. In this role, you would focus on mitigating risk from failed processes, systems, or external events. You're basically making sure that the financial controls are effective. This type of role probably requires the least amount of pure finance knowledge, but you'll have to learn a lot about that company's specific internal processes and systems. And then finally, the pinnacle role that you could achieve is the Chief Risk Officer, or CRO. In certain institutions, like some banks, the CRO actually makes more money than the CEO, depending on how much of a priority that company is putting on the risk department in general, like if they had a run-in with the regulators recently. So at the executive level, CROs manage enterprise risk, develop risk policies, and mitigate competitive and regulatory threats. So this is sort of the long-term goal for a lot of FRM holders. What is the average compensation post-completion? Well, according to Wall Street Oasis, those with the FRM certification can usually earn pretty substantial salaries, with the median pay at around 98,000 USD and top earners making 200,000 USD or more. I'll say that when I used to work at a large US bank, there were a lot of people that I knew in the financial risk management space that were definitely making well above that $200,000 USD mark. High-ranking people managers in the FRM space often earn well above the 200K mark. Analysts can typically earn closer to the 100K range, but you can definitely earn a lot more than that as an analyst in the FRM space. In fact, a lot of financial institutions will have different levels of analysts, where there'll be like an entry-level roles and then more senior ones or lead analysts. Some banks call them like VPs, different titles at every different organization, but a lot of them will pay their analysts way more than 100,000 USD. However, the compensation varies significantly depending on factors like the country that you live in, the city, number of years of experience of the employee, and the specific role within the industry. Whether the FRM designation is worth it, I would say really depends on what you want to do in your career and where you are currently in your career journey. So if you already know that you want to work in this financial risk management space and pursue one of the roles that I mentioned earlier in the video, then this certification is probably worth it for you. But on the other hand, if you're unsure about working in finance or what area of finance interests you the most, then FRM might not be the best fit at this time. That said, if you're like me and you just enjoy learning, studying, and acquiring more knowledge, then the threshold for it being worth it might be lower for you. So the concepts and skills you'll gain are definitely valuable in their own right, and I think there's something to be said about that. I also think that the financial risk management space can be relatively lower pressure area in finance to work in, because unlike roles that require, facing clients, selling, or generating revenue, I would say that FRM related positions often focus on analytical and strategic work. And this can make it a little bit more relaxed and a more balanced career path while still offering the excellent compensation. So that's it. Good luck with your decision, and subscribe to this channel for more content on the FRM.